OC 00011. A lot of zeros. And question 1. You have not answered any of the points put across here apart from the point on Muslim children being innocent and quoting my example of pro-Israel Muslims, which, by the way, is still something you didn't answer clearly about. The fact that some of these pro-Israel Arabs are Muslims by their self-definition, not by your definition, which is too absolute. I repeat, Islam doesn't equate to Muslims. Muslims can consider irrelevant certain passages in Quran and Hadiths, just as Jews have abundant levels of orthodoxy secularism. To clarify, I realize that the vast majority of Muslims are anti-Semitic. You don't realize that there are exceptions to the rule, and those pro-Israel Arab Muslims who risk their lives every day because of their fellow Muslims, intimidation, just to stand by Israel, voice their honest opinion in support of us, don't fit into your category of all Muslims being Nazis, quite the opposite, unquote. Where are all of these Muslims you're talking about? All right, you say the vast majority are anti-Semitic. This is, you know what you're telling me? This is like saying to me that not all Nazis are anti-Semitic. That there are Nazis who are pro-Israel and who like the Jews. If anyone believes in a Nazi philosophy and a Nazi religion and a Nazi ideology that calls for the extermination of the Jewish people, that makes them Nazis. If they don't believe in that, if anyone who's pro-Israel can't be a Muslim, can't be a real Muslim. You can't be. Anyone who believes in a religion that says that all Jews and all non-Muslims must eventually be either forcibly converted or exterminated, anyone who believes in that believes in a Nazi ideology. Very, very simple. Okay? Very, very simple. All right, let's go on here. I mean, the things you're talking about are just fantasy. You live in a complete fantasy world. Okay, now, question 2. You still insist strength is killing them all instead of taking precautions as Israel does in counteroffensives to avoid killing children. Is there no end to your insane remarks? Every child's life is equally sacred. They're not yet corrupted by the madness of mankind. You should read The Mark of Cain by Ram Oren. Maybe it'll open your mind a bit. How interesting that you choose to ignore my counter-argument on your view of black Africans. Please feel free to validate the legitimacy of the sources I mentioned regarding the ancient black civilization of DMT, Axum, and their rich cultural development of written language, trade, architecture, philosophy, instead of being instead of being stubborn, realize you, like everyone else, can make mistakes and acknowledge the fact that black Africans have been a civilized people when native people in England were swinging from trees, unquote. Okay, there are 2 points you make up that you deal with in this question. First, you talk about children and saving lives, and that when Israel strikes, Israel should be very careful not to hurt any of the Muslim Nazi civilians. Let me explain to you something very simple in our philosophy. The life of one Israeli Jew, whether it's an Israeli Jewish soldier or whether it's an Israeli Jewish civilian, is worth more to us than all the Muslim Nazis in the world put together. The life of one Jewish soldier being lost because of people like you. Because of people like you, Jews are murdered. Because of people like you, Israel has no security. If Israel would do what we say and would attack and destroy the nests of the terrorists, including the civilians who support the terrorists, if Israel would destroy those nests of terrorist activity, the Jews of Israel would live safely, and there would be deterrence, and that would save Jewish lives. And for us, that's what counts. One Jewish life to us is worth more than all the Muslim Nazi terrorists in the world put together, the lives of all of them, including the civilian terrorists who support them, because the Arab Muslim Nazi civilians support the terrorists. And as far as children are concerned, when their children grow up, their children are going to be terrorists. Okay? We are worried about saving Jewish lives here, not saving the lives of the enemy. You're the one who's making insane remarks. You worry more about the enemy than about your own people. You're the one who's making insane remarks. No sane person does what you do. And because of you, because of people like you, huge numbers of Jews have been murdered throughout history. Millions have died in the end because of you. Millions. And you're endangering the whole survival of the Jewish people with your craziness. And now, as far as black Africans, you're telling me about all the great black civilization here. How come when people went to Africa, all they discovered were people swinging from trees? I mean, black civilization, where is this? There was not, you say that it had written language? Blacks never developed any written language. What was the name of their written language? Trade and architecture and philosophy? You mean there were black philosophers in the jungles of Africa before whites and Arabs and others came there and discovered these people swinging from trees? They had philosophers. They had black Aristotles and they had people like black Aristotle and black Socrates and black Shakespeare's running around. Are you kidding me? Are you joking? Architecture? Where are the traces of this architecture? Where are the great traces of this architecture? I mean, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I mean, it's so absurd. To this day, they can't produce anything by themselves. To this day, they're completely dependent upon Whitey. The United States sends them billions of dollars in aid just for basic medicine for AIDS. They are unable to do anything, invent anything, or create anything by themselves to this day. Forget about going back. I mean, then they were even more uncivilized. But even after being exposed to centuries of European and Western civilization, they still don't know how to do anything. They still can't produce anything. So what are you talking about? And now question 3. Lastly, my argument on peace is, like I said, based on the success of our long-lasting peace with Jordan and Egypt, and that things would have been much worse with them if you took our approach, if we took your approach of strength. Unquote. Oh yes, things would have been much worse if Israel had kept the Sinai and had kept all the oil in the Sinai and was getting billions of dollars a year in oil from the Sinai instead of Nazi Egypt getting the billions of dollars a year from the Sinai when Israel surrendered the Sinai to Nazi Egypt for a worthless piece of paper. Yeah, that would have been much worse. If Israel had billions of dollars in oil every year from selling oil in the Sinai and had enough oil to meet 100% of Israel's energy needs for the next 100 years in the Sinai, that would have been much worse. You're so right. And if Israel had had the Sinai, which is 3 times the size of the state of Israel, had this huge buffer, this huge territory, if Israel had had all of this land, that would have been terrible. And if Israel had earned billions of dollars in tourist money from the Sinai, that would have been terrible. And if Israel had had the Sinai, so that the Egyptian Nazi army could not smuggle huge numbers of weapons to the Hamas terrorists and the Fatah terrorists through tunnels, which is what they've been doing ever since they had the Sinai. The Egyptian army is arming the terrorists in Gaza. The Egyptian army is the one that has been responsible for the murder of hundreds of innocent Jews from weapons that they have given to the Muslim terrorists in Gaza. If Israel had the Sinai, the Muslim terrorists in Gaza would never have gotten their hands on those weapons, and hundreds of Jews would be alive today. There is no peace with Egypt and Jordan. There is no peace with the wicked. There can be no peace with the wicked. The only language Arab Muslim Nazis understand is strength, and if we take power, there'll be strength. And if we take power, we're not going to depend on some piece of paper. We're not going to depend on some so-called treaty which with an Arab isn't worth the paper it's written on. If we take power, we're going to have the land we need to survive. We're going to have an army that defends itself. We're going to have a people that wants to win and that wants to survive again. We're a people with self-respect, a people with the desire to defend Jewish rights and Jewish honor and Jewish survival and stand against the evil enemy and know the difference between good and evil and know that we are right and they are wrong. Little Israel is right and the Arab Muslim Nazis that surround little Israel and have promised to push us into the sea are wrong. They're monsters. They're Nazis. They're purveyors of genocide, and they will be defeated if we take power. The great days of the Six-Day War in 1967 and all those great victories, we're going to bring that back for Israel. You can sit around and dream about crawling on your belly and begging Muslim Nazis for peace. That's not the way we're going to go. If we take power, we're going to win again for the Jewish people. We're not going to negotiate and surrender to evil. We're going to defeat evil.